Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone. Welcome to everyone online as well. I'm going to move into our two topics for this morning, which is understanding and experiencing the jhanas. The light bulb is flickering. This is where you start getting glimpses of some of the qualities that you're going to experience when the mind is enlightened. So that's why I call it the light bulb is flickering, because you start getting these little glimpses. It's kind of like going into a dark room and you click the light switch and the light bulb's going to kind of flicker. The old time light bulbs will kind of flicker, not these LED ones, but they'll kind of flicker for a while and then it'll boom, it'll be on. That's the way you experience enlightenment. While we call it attaining enlightenment, it's really more like the mind is already enlightened and you have pollutions that are in your mind. And as you peel those pollutions out of the mind and you get them out of the mind, the qualities of enlightenment start shining through more and more. And this is what the jhanas are, is that there's these enhanced qualities of mind that you start experiencing that shine through more and more. The way you might think about it is like there's the sun and then there's the clouds in front of the sun, and when you peel back the clouds, the rays of the sun start shining through more and more. And that's what you're going to be starting to experience in the jhanas, and then in the 4 stages of enlightenment as well. You're going to start noticing this. So while we oftentimes say attaining enlightenment, it's really more like the mind is already enlightened and you just got to get the pollutions out of the way. And as you're doing that, this is where you're going to start experiencing these enhanced qualities of the mind. So I'm going to walk you through this, helping you to see what these jhanas are, understanding what they are, and how the mind actually experiences these. And the reason why this is important is that once your mind starts experiencing the jhanas, your practice starts to pivot. Up to the point where your mind isn't experiencing the jhanas, you're putting together the Eightfold Path and you're trying to understand the Eightfold Path and dial this into your life closer and closer. You might think of it like a speaker system, that you have these 8 dials and you're tweaking these dials to get a better quality sound out of the speakers. Well, once you get that really good quality sound coming out of the speakers, you kind of pivot. And now maybe you start focusing on the audio-visual equipment, or you start focusing on some other aspect of this event that you're holding, right? You're not going to just keep tweaking the speaker system because you've got the speaker system really well developed. Now you can look at something else. Well, the same thing is true about your mind, is that you focus on the Eightfold Path first. You're working to get your arms around that, to fully understand it and dial that in closer and closer. But then once you're tweaking that and you've got it tweaked really well, you're going to start experiencing the jhanas, these enhanced qualities of mind. And at that point, you pivot and you start focusing on the 10 fetters. That's where you really start to hone in on those. And all the Eightfold Path and everything else that you're learning on the path to enlightenment, it's working to eliminate the 10 fetters. That's the whole reason why you're experiencing the jhanas, because the pollutions have actually come down to a certain degree, but they're still in the mind. They're still there. So the Eightfold Path, even things like the 5 precepts and all these things, they're working to eliminate the pollutions out of the mind in a more general and a more broad way. So that's why the jhanas are even starting to be experienced, because the pollution has come down to a certain degree. But now that you're experiencing those jhanas, that's where you pivot and you start looking at the individual fetters individually. And that's what I'm going to be doing this evening, is starting the rest of this retreat, where I'm going to go through each fetter, spending about an hour to an hour and a half in each one of our classes from now until the end of the retreat, where I'm going to explain what is the fetter, the symptoms of it, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've eliminated it. So understanding these jhanas is going to be really helpful for you, because that's where you know, I've put together the Eightfold Path really well. So that means that now that you've tweaked that and you've got that up and running really well in your life, you can start focusing on the 10 fetters more closely now. Because even though before you were focusing on them more generally and more broadly through the Eightfold Path, now you can actually target each one of them individually based on understanding these individual fetters that are in the mind. But first, you need to understand what the jhanas are so that you'll know that your mind is in these jhanas. That's why it's important to know what they are. Because when you're experiencing them, you need to know you're experiencing them and then pivot and make your way towards the 10 fetters and eliminating those. But the way you get to the jhanas is through the Eightfold Path, through practicing the entire Eightfold Path and tweaking this. So I'm going to share with you guys details on the jhanas. I'm going to share with you guys what they are And I'm also going to share with you guys what they are not, because that's going to help you to understand what they are. I'm going to teach you about the benefits of the jhanas. I'm even going to talk to you about the dangers of the jhanas, because there's certain dangers that you need to look out for, not like in terms of, oh my God, I need to be worried about this, but just certain things to keep your eye on as your mind is moving into the jhanas. So we'll discuss all of this, okay? So first, the word jhana, it's a Pali word that means meditative or mental absorption, that the mind has absorbed a certain amount of the teachings and a certain amount of meditation, right? If this translated to just one English word, I would use it. But there's only two words in Pali that I still need to use. It's jhana and gamma. Those are the only two, because they don't translate to just one English word. If they translated to just one English word, I would just use it because it'd be easier for everyone. But what this word jhana means is it means meditative absorption or mental absorption, where the mind is absorbed a certain amount of the teachings and a certain amount of meditation. And it refers to this deep and subtle concentration and enhanced qualities of mind that you're going to be experiencing when your mind's moving into these jhanas. In general, you're going to notice that the mind's relaxed and calm, but yet attentive and alert. Because oftentimes when we think about relaxed and calm, we think like kind of vegetating, right? But that's not the way that your mind is going to experience the jhanas and beyond, because there's going to be a relaxed and calm state in the mind, but the mind's going to be attentive and alert. It's going to be sharp. Okay, so that's part of what you're going to experience as your mind's moving into the jhanas. But we're going to get a lot deeper into this so that you'll understand more. The way that I think about the jhanas is I think about it as the light bulbs flickering, giving you these glimpses of some of the qualities that you're going to experience as your mind's moving further on the path. Sometimes what you're going to hear me say is that sometimes when people get into the jhanas, they actually think they're enlightened, because it's like night and day. From when you are off the path to enlightenment till your mind's in the jhanas, it's like night and day, because you're experiencing these enhanced qualities, because you've eliminated some of the pollution of the mind. So sometimes people actually think they're enlightened when they're experiencing these jhanas, but you'll hear more about what I have to share about that later. So these jhanas are 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through as it's making its way to the first stage of enlightenment. Every single person who makes their way to the first stage of enlightenment or beyond, they will experience the jhanas. You can't actually get to the first stage of enlightenment without experiencing the jhanas. And you guys will understand that more when you see what the jhanas are. It's more than just meditation that's going to help you to be able to get to these 4 preliminary phases of enhanced qualities of mind. You even need things like the 5 precepts. Without understanding the 5 precepts closely, which is going to improve your moral conduct and the way that you're functioning in your day-to-day life, you wouldn't be able to experience the jhanas. Because remember, those 5 precepts, they're not rules, they're not commandments. The Buddha's not trying to convince you to do anything. Instead, what they're doing is they're helping you to reduce the pollution of your mind. Because in order to kill or steal or have sexual misconduct or lie or take substances that cause heedlessness, there needs to be a certain amount of craving, a certain amount of anger, and a certain amount of ignorance that's in the mind in order to be able to do those types of things. So it's not like rules and commandments. No one's ever going to get to enlightenment through rules and commandments. You need to understand the reason why the Buddha is teaching those things, so that then you can practice them and you'll be successful at reducing the pollutions of the mind through even something like the 5 precepts. So you'll see different people will teach different numbers of jhanas. You might hear people teach 8 jhanas or any number of different jhanas. You're going to see through the words of the Buddha, he only ever taught 4. So there's a lot of misinformation in the world about the teachings of the Buddha, because not everybody studies his original words. And now, 2,500 years later, we're at this low point in society. Exactly what the Buddha said would occur, where there's a lot of misinformation in the world. And that's why you're interested in studying with his original words and being able to have very good quality translations to be able to see what did he teach. And then that way you'll know what he did teach and what he didn't teach. And you're going to see information from other people, but you're going to know that that's not accurate and that's not what the Buddha taught. And he explained that you would come in contact with people who have misunderstood his teachings. And he says when you do that, when you see that someone's teaching something opposite of what he taught, he suggested for you to ignore this teaching. Right? So just ignore it. Even if it's a monk, even if it's a senior person in the community, no matter who it is, if it's conflicting with what the Buddha taught, he suggested for you to ignore that teaching. Because once you change the teachings of a Buddha, it's going to harm yourself and it's going to harm countless other people. You would like to get as close to what the Buddha was teaching during his lifetime as possible, because that's what's going to actually produce enlightenment for you. And he teaches you that if you change his teachings, it's for your harm and for the harm of countless people in the world. So you'll see different people teaching different numbers of jhanas, but you'll be able to see through his original words that he actually only taught 4. And then when your mind is moving through those 4 jhanas and you can independently verify that that's what's occurring, you'll know that this is the truth, that he actually only taught 4 jhanas, because you can see exactly as your mind's moving through those 4 jhanas. So the jhanas are an indication for you that you're putting together all the steps of the Eightfold Path really well, because you wouldn't be able to experience the jhanas without all of those individual factors. Sometimes people think it's only meditation that is going to lead to the jhanas, but you're going to see that it's all the individual steps that are leading to the jhanas, because all those steps are helping you to remove and eliminate and reduce the pollutions of the mind. You wouldn't be able to experience the jhanas without all the factors of the Eightfold Path. So as I mentioned, every practitioner will experience the jhanas on their way to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to experience enlightenment without the jhanas. You wouldn't even be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment without the jhanas. So the jhanas are temporary. They're not meant for the mind to dwell in these phases, even though those qualities that you're going to experience are persistent all throughout your day. Even when your mind is enlightened, you're still going to be experiencing the qualities of the jhanas all throughout your days. You're not meant to dwell in those jhanas, because sometimes what happens is people get bogged down in the jhanas because it's so pleasurable to experience this, that as they're starting to experience those enhanced qualities, they will kind of become complacent and they will kind of cling to what's going on when they're experiencing those jhanas, and they won't continue to focus on developing their practice to move beyond the jhanas. So these jhanas are temporary. They're not meant for the mind to dwell in those phases. If your mind is in the jhanas and you become complacent, your mind can actually regress backwards. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind won't regress backwards. But if you get into the jhanas and you become complacent, your mind can actually regress out of them. This is a very common thing that some people might experience. You can actually even stumble into the jhanas. To get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would need to be very intentional about developing your practice and actually get to that first stage of enlightenment. But I've had students, actually they're not students, just people that have contacted me over the years that have kind of stumbled into these jhanas, not even realizing that that's what it is. I've had people contact me over the years and they say, David, 10 years ago, I was experiencing this and this and this and this and this, and it was only going on for like a week or two. And then I never experienced that ever again. What was that? Well, what it was is they kind of stumbled into the jhanas. They experienced these enhanced qualities. They weren't continuing to develop their practice, and their mind regressed back out of it, right? So people can even stumble into these jhanas in some cases, depending on what it is that they're learning and practicing from different places. But in order to actually firmly get into the jhanas and beyond, you need to be really consistent with the Eightfold Path. So these are improved qualities that you're experiencing at all times during your day. They're going to continue to permeate in the mind, even when your mind is actually enlightened and moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. As I mentioned, the jhanas are oftentimes mistaken as enlightenment because of the improved qualities of mind that an individual is experiencing and the lack of wisdom of what the jhanas are and what enlightenment is. You'll hear some people that'll tell you that enlightened beings still get angry, still get frustrated, still get annoyed, or things like this. And when you hear people that are saying that, there's the potential that they're experiencing the jhanas. They think that they're enlightened, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment, when in reality their mind is actually in the jhanas, because an enlightened being doesn't experience anger and sadness and annoyment and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. So those heightened qualities of mind, if somebody doesn't understand that there's the jhanas and there's enlightenment and these things are completely different, they could be experiencing those enhanced qualities, which are very impactful for the mind. They're very profound, that they actually think that they're enlightened in that situation. So by you understanding what the jhanas are, you'll know that you're not enlightened yet, that there's much more room to grow and develop beyond that. Let's talk about what the jhanas are not. They are not something to boast about or claim that you have attained a certain jhana, right? This isn't something you're going to put on your Facebook profile, or you're going to call home to mom and be like, hey, mom, guess what? I'm in the second jhana. Aren't you proud of me? Right? This isn't something that you're going to do. This is for your own growth, your own development. You might think of it like a personal growth plan. You might talk about it with your teacher because you're trying to understand the jhanas, right? You're not doing it out of conceit. You're not doing it based in the ego. You're trying to understand what these jhanas are. You might say, hey, I'm experiencing these qualities and I think I'm in the second jhana. What do you think, teacher? And then now you're trying to understand these jhanas, right? So that's a potential, but you're not going to really be having conversations about what you think you've attained with anybody else beyond that, because it would be the mind's conceit. And that's going to hold you back from making further progress on the path. The jhanas are not something that is only experienced in meditation, and it's not only meditation that will produce these mental qualities. The jhanas are improved qualities of mind that you're experiencing at all times during your day. And you're going to see that when I share with you the words of the Buddha. You don't need to take my word for it. You can see the words of the Buddha. But then don't even believe that. See it for yourself as your mind's making your way through the jhanas. Then you'll actually know for yourself that the words that you're seeing in the books are true. And what David's telling you is true because you've confirmed it for yourself through experiencing it. So don't believe other people, but don't believe me either. And don't believe the books that I share. See it for yourself. The jhanas are not something to crave or desire and become obsessed with about what jhana you're in and what jhana you're headed towards. I've seen practitioners do this, not people who study with me, but other people. I've seen them, talking about the second and the third jhana, and they're trying to put this under a microscope and figure out exactly what jhana they're in and what jhana they're headed towards and all this kind of stuff. And they really get bogged down in these jhanas because their conceit is kicking in and they're obsessively trying to figure out, are they in the second jhana or the third jhana? Because there's really nothing special that you need to do in order to move from the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. It actually is all coming from exactly the same thing, which is putting together the Eightfold Path really closely and now pivoting and starting to focus on the fetters. So it's not like you have to do anything special to move from the second or third jhana, right? It's just continuing to do what you've already been doing, which is putting together the Eightfold Path really closely and now pivoting to start focusing on the fetters. So you can stay focused on the 10 fetters without becoming obsessed with the jhanas, because that's only going to hinder progress. It's important to keep in mind that the jhanas are not enlightenment. Even though there's very profound qualities and you're going to really enjoy being in the jhanas, it's important to understand that there's growth and development way beyond that. Whatever you're experiencing in the jhanas, it pales in comparison to what you're going to experience by the time your mind gets to enlightenment. So while those qualities are very impactful and you're going to enjoy that a lot, just understand there's something way beyond the jhanas, and that's enlightenment. And that's what you would like to stay focused on, not allowing the mind to get bogged down into the jhanas. The jhanas aren't something mystical or magical that if you're experiencing them, it determines that you're a special person or a special type of person or only experienced by special people. This isn't true. This is the mind's conceit that's kicking in, right? Anybody and everybody who can learn, reflect, and practice can experience these jhanas. Whether you're a household practitioner or an ordained practitioner, no matter what ethnicity you are, no matter what sexual orientation you are, no matter what gender you are, everybody and anybody can experience these jhanas. Okay, so now some of the dangers of the jhanas. So due to these drastically improved qualities of mind, conceit can kick in when the jhanas are starting to be experienced. There can be boastfulness. There can be judgment of other people. The mind can be prideful and looking down on other people. Because one of the qualities that you experience as your mind's going through the jhanas is enhanced concentration and focus, clarity of mind. And you'll see that other people's mind will be quite muddled, and you might take conceit in the fact that your mind is more concentrated and focused. So it's important that you don't allow that conceit to to overtake your mind when you're experiencing the jhanas, because otherwise you're going to get bogged down in the jhanas. So you'd like to remain humble and down to earth, realizing that not everybody's on the path and that's their choice. And maybe their mind is more muddled, but we don't need to judge that person for that. We can just know that this person's mind is less concentrated and be fortunate and be thankful and appreciative that you've learned these teachings and that your mind is more concentrated, but don't take pride and boastfulness in that. The mind can become complacent when it's in the jhanas because those qualities of mind are so impactful and so pleasurable that the mind can become somewhat complacent, where you don't have as much dedication and diligence to developing your practice any longer. And if this occurs, your mind can regress backwards. So you're not interested in your mind becoming complacent. So if you notice that complacency coming in, it's best to address it as soon as possible. The way complacency works is that if you let it sit around in the mind for multiple weeks or months, it's a lot harder to move the mind out of complacency. So if you notice that you're normally coming to the temple regularly, you're normally meditating regularly, you're normally reading books and things like this, getting help from your teacher regularly, but then you kind of like go off and you're not meditating very much, you're not attending classes, you're not reading books, you can see your mind's becoming dull and lethargic. You would like to jump on that as soon as possible, because the longer you allow that complacency to set into the mind, the harder it is to come out of it. Now, if you're learning for a period of time and you're meditating and you're coming to the temple and you're reading books and you choose to go away in order to take those things and put it into practice, but you're still meditating and you're still actively developing your moral conduct and things like this, that's not complacency. That means that you've taken what you've learned in certain classes and now you're applying it. You're still meditating, you're still applying the teachings, you're still dedicated to developing your mind. You're just not maybe attending classes as much. That's fine. That's not complacency, because you're still actively moving your practice forward. But it's where you see that you're not meditating, you're not looking at books, you're not talking to the teacher, you're not coming to classes. And if you're doing that for an extended period of time, your mind's becoming complacent. And the longer you allow that to occur, the harder it is to get it out. So pay attention to that and don't allow the mind to experience that, because that dullness and that lethargic condition is going to overtake the mind and it's a lot harder to get it out. So with complacency, the mind's going to regress out of those jhanas, and that's not going to allow you to continue to make forward progress. So that's why you would like to pay attention to the complacency and not allowing the mind to do that. In the jhanas, you can become overwhelmed with excitement and joy, and it's a challenge to restrain the mind sometimes and control it during that period of time. That's why it's so important that you practice all the factors of the Eightfold Path, because as your mind starts to experience that excitement and that joy where it becomes overjoyed and maybe even overactive, you need to be able to restrain the mind and be able to control it. So sometimes people have a lot of challenges in the jhanas to be able to control the mind. And you might even notice this swinging of the mind, kind of like a pendulum, where your mind can go to this excitement and joy, but then it can swing over here to dullness and lethargic condition or sadness. Your mind might actually swing more like a pendulum as your mind is in these jhanas. So you need to be able to spot that and be able to bring the mind more and more to the middle. And what's going to help you to do that is the 7 factors of enlightenment. I taught this on Sunday, and if you guys haven't learned that with me yet, it's in volume 1, chapter 3, where you can learn about the 7 factors of enlightenment. These aren't to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened. This is a tool to fine-tune the mind so that when you see it in this excited, overactive state, you can calm it down and bring it to the middle. But where you see it sluggish and dull, you can lift it up and bring it to the middle. So the 7 factors of enlightenment is what will help you to ensure that you can control the mind and it can be disciplined when you're experiencing these swings within the jhanas. There's a significant amount of energy that can be experienced when you're in the jhanas. You can almost have these surges of energy. So if you're noticing those kinds of things, once again, it's the 7 factors of enlightenment that are going to help you to fine-tune the mind in these situations. Some of the benefits of the jhanas is that it's an indication that you're developing the Eightfold Path and you're moving in the right direction. This is the light bulb flickering. This is helping you to be able to see, I'm putting this together really well, right? And that's going to help you to then know to pivot towards the 10 fetters. These are improved qualities of mind that are actually needed for further progress on the path to enlightenment. You're going to see that when I share with you guys what the qualities of the jhanas are. Without these jhanas, you wouldn't actually be able to make any further progress. You're going to see, like, in the second jhana, you experience what's called oneness of mind, or unification of the mind. Prior to the second jhana, you have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind, and you're aware of your conscious mind, but you're not aware of your subconscious mind. And both of these are polluted, so you need to clean them up. So if you've ever been around people and you just kind of blurted something out and you were like, where did that come from? I don't think that way. That was kind of sexist, or that was racist. Why did I say that? I don't think that way. That's your subconscious mind throwing things up into your conscious mind, and you just blurted it out, right? So in order to get to enlightenment, where you purify your mind, you're going to need to be able to see the entire mind. By the time you get to the second jhana, there is no subconscious mind. You have had oneness of mind, or unification of the mind, where you can actually see the entire mind. And you need that in order to be able to get to enlightenment, because you wouldn't be able to purify your entire mind if you still had a subconscious mind, because you're not aware of it. So this is where you're going to be experiencing these qualities all throughout your day, right? It's not just during meditation that you have oneness of mind. It's your entire day that you have this unification of mind, or oneness of mind. And you need that quality in others that you're experiencing in the jhanas to actually be able to purify the mind. So the subconscious mind is actually eliminated, and one will develop this full awareness of mind, this right mindfulness, this awareness of mind. That's where you actually develop your right mindfulness, is you're working on it prior to the jhanas, but by the time you get to the jhanas, your mindfulness is fully developed. You'll be able to be aware of the entire mind. And this is one of the benefits of being in the jhanas. During the jhanas, there's the cultivation of deep wisdom. You're going to see this thinking and pondering that the Buddha talks about, where in the past, there were certain things that you were experiencing, and you just were kind of plowing through life and not really paying attention to the decisions that you're making, where by the time you get to the jhanas, you're going to experience this thinking and pondering, that any situation that you're in, you're going to be thinking about the teachings of the Buddha and how can you handle this situation with the teachings of the Buddha. Where in the past, you might have just plowed through that thing and not even really given it much thought, where now you understand the natural law of karma, that any decision you make is going to produce a certain result, and you start thinking and pondering about the teachings of the Buddha before you actually make this decision. And this is where you cultivate deep wisdom about the natural laws, and the path to enlightenment is during this period of time. So you'll see that. And this is where we might refer to this as the opening of the inner eye, or the third eye, or the Buddha calls it the divine eye, or some people call it the spiritual eye. This is where you become very introspective and inward looking, and you're going to need to cultivate that and practice that all throughout your day. And this is where the mind is really opening up and starting to develop deep wisdom and deep insight. So by the time you get to the jhanas, there'll be wisdom to know what is wholesome and unwholesome, and you'll be able to make improved decisions in all parts of your life, including like what friends to associate with, or if you're going to have a life partner, who's your life partner going to be, and making a wise decision about that, or where to live and where to associate and where to go on holidays and where to spend your time. You're going to be making wise decisions about these things more and more and more, because you're cultivating this deep wisdom. Okay, some more benefits of the jhanas is that discontentedness is significantly reduced when you're in the jhanas. It's not eliminated. You'll still experience sadness. You'll still experience frustration and agitation and annoyment, but it's not as significant as it was when you were off the path to enlightenment. You're going to notice this calmness and composure is more readily available and easily practiced when your mind is in the jhanas. This is the equanimity, the calmness and composure of mind, especially in difficult situations. By the time you get to the fourth jhana, your mind is fully developed equanimity, where you're calm and composed. Inwardly, your mind might be struggling with certain things, but outwardly, people aren't going to necessarily know that, because you have the equanimity to be calm and composed by the time your mind is in these jhanas. There's more awareness of the interconnectivity of nature, of all beings, like animals and other beings in other realms. You're going to have this kind of sense of interconnectivity with all the beings around you. You might even notice, I don't think I have it up here, you might even notice more vivid colors. Your eyes will start functioning better when your mind is in the jhanas, because your mind is functioning better, your brain is functioning better, and you might actually see the colors in life are more vivid and more bright when you're in these jhanas. Smiling becomes easier because there's a more cheerful disposition. There's more gladness in the mind. So you're going to notice that smiling becomes a lot easier. This is one of the reasons why they call Thailand the land of smiles, because it's really easy to smile when your mind is cheerful and joyful on the inside, right? So you might notice that you actually smile more. I noticed that prior to experiencing some of these things that you experience on the path, I noticed that the muscles in my face were hurting because I hadn't smiled so much before. I actually had to start, as I started smiling, I started noticing this pain all throughout my face because I hadn't used those muscles in so long, because I was going around being grumpy and irritable and frustrated and hostile and bitter. And now when your mind starts being more cheerful and bright and uplifted, you might notice some pain in your face from the muscles of being more cheerful and smiling more frequently. You'll notice that you have easier development of relationships with wholesome friends, and being able to build relationships with the people around you as you're moving into the jhanas. Because you're practicing more wholesome intentions, speech, and actions, you're going to notice that the people around you are going to relate to you in a better way. And you'll find that because you understand wise moral conduct, you'll be better at making choices about who to involve in your life. You're not interested in judging other people and looking down on them, but you will make wise decisions of who to include in your life. And it's in these jhanas that you start really developing that awareness to be able to do that. Okay, so any questions on what the jhanas are, what they are not, the dangers or the benefits of the jhanas? Yes, sir. Those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and let me know your questions.
I have a question about smiling. As I heard, maybe it's not true, but as I heard that the historical Buddha wasn't smiling much when he was living. Like he had some kind of situations where he was walking on some area and he had a smile, and his closest student Ananda asked him, "Why are you smiling?" And it was kind of a point to smile, but he actually haven't been smiling much. Is it true?
That's not true. You won't find that anywhere in the Pali Canon. Enlightened beings are very cheerful, very bright, very joyful and uplifted. If you're walking around serious and stern and solemn all the time, that's what people usually depict the Buddha as in these pictures. He's always meditating and looking so solemn and serious. But that's not the way an enlightened being walks through life. Like, who would ever be interested in that kind of life, right? So the Buddha was had charisma. He was charismatic. He was bright and cheerful. He was, polite and respectful. He didn't walk around like, kind of grumpy and irritable and scowling at people and stuff like this. So you'll hear different rumors of what people will say, but this isn't actually true. You won't find it anywhere in the Pali Canon. This is what just people have through hearsay that they say these things.
I think I remembered where I heard it. It was kind of a research of some suttas in Pali Canon, and this point was based on the exact translation, like from Pali to English. I think it was Bhikkhu Bodhi, and he said something like, because Ananda asked Buddha, "Why are you smiling?" it can mean that he was not smiling much, so Ananda noticed it, and it was kind of unusual situation for him. That's why he asked.
Have you seen that for yourself in the Pali Canon?
I think not like all the sutta.
Yeah. So there you go, right? So people just believe things that they hear from one person to the other. You need to be able to see for yourself. You'll never see anywhere in the Pali Canon where the Buddha is documented as having not been smiling, right? This is the unfortunate part of where we are in our time frame now, that people have all kinds of perceptions of what they think enlightenment is, or what the Buddha did, or what he didn't do. And you need to be able to see the truth for yourself and be able to understand that an enlightened being is cheerful, they're bright, they're radiant, they're joyful, they're uplifted. An enlightened being is going to frequently smile because inside they're inwardly joyful, they're inwardly peaceful. So when people are coming up with these things, unless you see it for yourself, you don't know that it's true. And it's best that you don't cling to that perception, because then you're going to think that an enlightened being doesn't smile, and now you're going to go around the world not smiling. Same thing, like if you use unreliable translations, like sometimes you'll see the Pali Canon where someone will translate the Buddha saying, "You stupid fool," right? This isn't the way that an enlightened being speaks, but you'll find translations of the Pali Canon where people say that, and they've translated like that. So what's happening here is an unenlightened being who's translating is looking at a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha's words, which we don't agree what all these words mean. And now this unenlightened being, they say, "You stupid fool." They think, "You stupid fool." And now, because that's what their mind thinks and that's the way they speak, they're translating the words of the Buddha to say that. But they don't understand an enlightened being doesn't speak that way. They would never be degrading or disparaging to another person. So you can actually read actual translations of the Pali Canon from certain people that will translate the Buddha's words in that way. And you can know that that's not the way a Buddha speaks. That's not the way an enlightened being speaks. So that when you hear also hearsay about people saying that an enlightened being doesn't smile, this is not true at all. Okay, so let me see. We don't have any other questions. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you guys the words of the Buddha, where he talks about the jhanas. So I'm going to read this to you so you can see what he teaches, but then I'm going to break it down for you and I'm going to teach it to you so you can see how these are occurring in the mind. So he describes this in right concentration. This is the 8th step of the Eightfold Path. And he puts it there in the 8th step of the Eightfold Path because it's the entire path that you need in order to be able to experience the jhanas. He's explaining to you the results or the byproduct of having put together every single factor of the Eightfold Path. The way that you practice right concentration, he actually teaches in a different discourse. And that's where I teach you guys that it's meditation and practicing singleness of mind. That's how you actually practice right concentration. What he's teaching you here is the results of having put together the entire Eightfold Path. That's why he puts it here. Okay, so he says, in what monks is right concentration? Here, a monk distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. And with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. And with the fading away of excitement, remaining imperturbable, which means to be unable to be upset or excited, where the mind is calm, serene, mindful and clearly aware, he experiences in himself the joy of which the noble ones say, "Peaceful is he who resides with equanimity and mindfulness." He enters the third jhana. And having given up pleasure and pain, and with the fading away of former gladness and sadness, he enters and resides in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, and purified by equanimity and mindfulness. This is called right mindfulness. So, as I mentioned, if you experience these jhanas, you'll know that your mind is residing in these jhanas, that it's in there. The mind is in that mental state, that you're not turning it on and turning it off. And it's not just in meditation that you're experiencing these jhanas. You can see here in the words of the Buddha, where each one of these jhanas, the individual enters and resides in that jhana, right? So you're experiencing the qualities of that jhana all throughout your day. You're not entering and exiting out of the jhana, like, for example, during meditation or something like that. So now, as I go through and I explain these qualities, you'll be able to understand this more, that your mind is residing in these qualities. Okay? So here, what I've done is I've broken down each one of the jhanas so you can understand what you're experiencing in each one of these. Because remember, when you're experiencing these, this is an indication for you that you're putting together the Eightfold Path well, and now you need to pivot and start focusing on the 10 fetters. So that's why it's important for you to know what the jhanas are, so that you're aware that your mind's starting to experience this. So this first jhana, the mind is distant from sense desires and distant from unwholesome mental states. What this means is that by the time you've gotten to the first jhana, you understand sensual desire, the fetter of sensual desire. You understand that what the mind is doing is it's longing, yearning with craving, desire, attachment. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings. And those are conditioned pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. And when the mind's not getting what it wants, it ends up experiencing these painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others. And because you've seen that very clearly and you've independently verified it, your mind is starting to distance yourself from sensual desires, that your mind is no longer chasing and longing and yearning. It will have craving, desire, attachment when you're in these jhanas, but your mind is starting to distance yourself from it. So you might notice that you're less and less interested in things like alcohol or drugs and things like this. You're starting to distance yourself from all of those things. You're starting to distance yourself from the things that the mind is longing, yearning for, that you're starting to kind of peel that back some. And the same thing with unwholesome mental states. You're less and less interested in anger and frustration and bitterness. You're starting to just become disinterested in it. And you're starting to distance yourself from those unwholesome qualities. You're less and less interested in being judgmental and conceited and looking down on people. Your mind are still doing those things when you're in the jhanas, but you're starting to distance yourself from it because you've seen the truth, how these things lead to unwholesome results. So you're starting to distance yourself from these things. In the first jhana, this is with thinking and pondering. So in the past, where you used to experience certain situations when you were off the path to enlightenment, you just kind of maybe plowed through those situations, not really paying attention to what decisions you were making and how those things were occurring. Now you're starting to think and ponder. When you're starting to experience things in your day-to-day life, you're in a certain situation, you're starting to think, how should I handle this with these teachings of the Buddha? In the past, when my mom would say this, that, and the other thing, I would just yell and holler and scream right back at her. But now, what would be the best way to handle this? Maybe I should use right intention. Maybe I should use right speech. Would that be right action if I did this or that? You start to think about how to handle it, right? Maybe you get a notice in the mail from the government saying that you owe them $3,000 for back taxes that you didn't pay. Maybe in the past you just didn't care. You would rip up the letter, throw it away, or maybe you would call the government to yell and holler at them. Maybe you would write them a nasty letter. Now you're like, how should I handle this? I'm getting this letter that I owe money. What would be the best way to take care of this, right? You're starting to think and ponder about each situation that you're in and how you should handle it in a given situation, right? So that's the thinking and pondering. And then you're going to notice that the mind is filled with this excitement. This is conditional excitement based on conditions. And then there's some joy that's starting to come in. Whenever you see me use the word joy, I'm using it in terms of unconditioned joy. You're going to start noticing more and more that unconditioned joy coming into the mind. You still have conditional excitement in the jhanas, but you're starting to experience this unconditioned joy, right? And these are things that you're experiencing at all times during your day. It's not just during meditation that you're having this things that are occurring, right? Now, as your mind's moving, continuing to practice the Eightfold Path and starting to focus more and more on the 10 fetters, your mind's going to move into the second jhana. When your mind's moving into the second jhana, you're going to start noticing this subsiding of thinking and pondering, because you're going to be in the second jhana for many months, maybe even years, perhaps, right? Or in this first jhana, you're going to be in this first jhana for many months, maybe even years, particularly because of this thinking and pondering. You need to cultivate a lot of wisdom about this path. And then as you're getting more and more wisdom on board, when you get into the second jhana, there's this subsiding of thinking and pondering. You're still going to think and ponder, but it's just starting to subside a bit. It's not as intensive as it once was. Then there's this inner tranquility and oneness of mind with concentration. The tranquility is the calmness and composure that's starting to come into the mind, where the mind's becoming more relaxed and more calm, more peaceful. This oneness of mind is that unification of the mind, where there's no longer a subconscious mind. It's just an entire mind that you can see. Where prior to the second jhana, there was a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. But now you've had this unification of the mind, or this oneness of mind, where you can see the entire mind. And you need that at all times during your day. And you're going to notice more focus and more concentration starting to come into the mind, where you can be focused in your day-to-day life. Then, by the time you move out of this jhana, the thinking and pondering is gone, right? You're still going to be able to reflect on decisions that you're making. You're still going to need that, but you don't have this intensive thinking and pondering anymore that you once had when you were in the jhanas, that you're still reflecting on the teachings, still thinking about them, and still trying to figure out how to implement them in certain situations, but it's not as intense the way that it was when you were in the first jhana. So that intensity of the thinking and pondering is gone. But the mind still has this excitement and joy, where there's this conditional excitement, and then there's this unconditioned joy that is starting to expand more and more and more, where you can just be happy without any condition being met. You might notice it for a few minutes, a few days, maybe even a week or two. You might notice that there's this unconditioned joy that is just in the mind. There's no reason for your joy. It's just joyful. The mind is just glad and cheerful and bright and uplifted. And that's where you can smile really easily during these periods of time when you're noticing that. Then the third jhana, there's this fading away of the excitement. Remember, this is the conditional excitement, that based on some condition, I will be excited. That's starting to fade away, right? That this is moving away from the mind, because now the unconditioned joy is starting to come through more and more. That there's this conditional excitement going down, but this unconditioned joy is coming up into the mind more and more. And this is where the mind becomes imperturbable, where you're incapable of becoming upset, or excited, and the mind is calm and serene. That's the imperturbability of the mind. And now there's this mindfulness and being clearly aware. The mindfulness is the awareness of mind. This is becoming more and more honed when you're in the third jhana. And then this experiencing joy, that's coming through more and more. The unconditioned joy is rising up more and more. Then the Buddha talks about peacefully residing with equanimity and mindfulness. This is where that calmness and composure, especially in difficult situations, is more and more profound in the mind, and you have full awareness of the mind. By the time you get to the jhanas, you will have fully developed your equanimity and mindfulness, as you'll see down here. Okay, so now going into the fourth jhana, you've given up pleasure and pain. What this means is you've given up conditional pleasure and pain, that you understand the dangers in that you're no longer chasing after conditional experiences. You still have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, but you've understood through practicing the teachings that continuing to chase is no longer viable. It's not going to lead to satisfaction. So you're not chasing after conditional pleasure, and therefore you're experiencing less and less conditional pain. So it's not that you're completely out of it. You still have craving, desire, attachment, but your mind has decided, not interested in this anymore. And you're starting to make your way away from these conditional experiences. So the mind is given up on the chasing after this pleasure and pain. The mind's still doing it in some situations, but your mind has given up on it. And then there's this fading away of the former gladness and sadness, this excitement this conditional happiness that's continuing to fade away, as well as the sadness. Because if you eliminate the conditional pleasant feelings, you'll eliminate the painful ones, right? Because if you allow your mind to get happy when you get that brand new job, when the company goes out of business and you lose your job, you'll get sad, you'll get frustrated. So by giving up on the pleasure and pain, you'll notice the fading away of this excitement, and you'll also notice the fading away of sadness, where your mind's coming more and more to the middle. And these are the conditional experiences. And now the unconditioned joy is coming through more and more. The mind gets to a point where it's beyond pleasure and pain, where it's no longer going up and down with these extremes the way it was before. And this is where the mind has fully developed its equanimity and mindfulness. These have been brought to fulfillment, where the mind's completely practicing equanimity and mindfulness. It's fully developed. So you will understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness and be practicing them fully by the time that you get to this 4th jhana, as well as equanimity. Your mind will be calm and composed and have evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. So even if you got a phone call that your mom's been in a terrible car accident and she's being rushed to the hospital and she's in the back of an ambulance, you would be completely calm and composed in that situation, right? So the equanimity has come into the mind at this point. So do you guys have any questions on any of these 4 jhanas and what you would be experiencing in each of the 4 jhanas? Oh, you have a question? Okay, sure.
Can you explain again what equanimity is?
Equanimity is calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. So like your mom's in a car accident and is being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. The only reason why your mind gets shaken up in that situation is because of craving, desire, attachment, and the mind doesn't have discipline, it doesn't have control. So by the time you fully develop your equanimity, you'll be able to maintain your calmness and composure. The mind won't be unsteady and shaken up like that. Okay. All right. So, we have another question? Yep.
Thank you, teacher. I think I have moments or periods when I experience something similar to the descriptions here. And the feeling isn't one of joy or bliss. It's a sense of nothingness in a way. Not to be mistaken with a depressed feeling. It's not that. It's a sense that these things that I suppose I spent years, decades maybe pursuing or chasing or believing would make me happy in some way, once I've let that false belief go, I'm left with something that's just, there's a sort of an emptiness. I can't really articulate it. It's kind of, I don't know, I'd love to be able to articulate it well, but it's just like this sort of barren kind of feeling, you know, and as I say, it's not unpleasant and it's not pleasant, it's just, I look at it, you know, and I'll say it here, I wouldn't say it to many people, it sounds, I think people find it morose, but I contemplate death in that state. There's more room in my mind to contemplate death, because there seems to be less of an idea of I could, you know, preserve this body and travel to this country or meet this particular person or do these things or live in this house or whatever it would be. It's just me in this sense of just moving forward. It's hard to describe. Yeah, there is a question in there somewhere. I just don't know what it is. But
so what I would encourage you to do is just keep focusing on the Eightfold Path, developing that, and then do what you're doing now, which is this retreat is going to help you understand the fetters so that you can start focusing on the fetters more and more. So sounds like there needs to be probably some more development with the Eightfold Path and then focusing on the fetters. That's what's going to help you to not only experience more and more of these types of qualities, but all the others as well. So you don't have to put everything you experience into words. That's okay. but just know what you need to do to keep moving the mind forward. That's what's important. Okay. All right. So now, these are some more words of the Buddha on the jhanas, and I put a whole collection of discourses here, and I shrunk them down into very small little bits so that you guys could see some of the things that he's teaching about the jhanas here. So this first one, he's talking about blindfolding Mara. Mara is a formless being that's interested in causing calamity in the world. Some people refer to this being as the devil or Satan or things like this. This is an actual real being that you can potentially come in contact with, and beings working on Mara's behalf. They're trying to influence you to do unwholesome things, and they're going to try to tempt you with your sensual desires. But by the time you get to the jhanas, Mara is what the Buddha is describing as being blindfolded, because Mara knows that you have enough wisdom at this point that you can't be easily tempted into some particular sensual desire. So this being Mara no longer tries to tempt you when you're in the jhanas, and beings working on Mara's behalf, they no longer try to tempt you when your mind is firmly in the jhanas. And you can see that here with the words of the Buddha. And the Buddha also talks about being secure from danger. He talks about this being Mara in more detail, about how you're now secure from danger, because essentially you have enough wisdom by the time you get into the jhanas that you know what's wise and unwise. You're not going to just make some unwise decision haphazardly and without knowing. If you decided to do something unwise while you're in the jhanas, your mind knows that it's unwise. So you're not going to be easily influenced when your mind's in the jhanas. The Buddha talks about the jhanas as a higher mind, that you've moved to this higher consciousness. That's what you're doing on the entire path to enlightenment, and getting to enlightenment is you're moving to this higher consciousness. And the jhanas is like the first real big indication that your mind is moving to this higher mind or this higher consciousness. The Buddha talks about how getting to the jhanas leads to enlightenment, that essentially you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without experiencing the jhanas, that the jhanas slant, slope, and incline towards enlightenment. So they lead towards enlightenment itself. If you die when you're in the jhanas, the Buddha talks about an improved rebirth, that you can experience this improved rebirth. But obviously you're interested in getting to enlightenment. You're not interested in dying when you're in the jhanas, but for some reason, if you die while your mind is in the jhanas, there's an improved rebirth. And then the Buddha talks about inconceivable matters. He talks about these 5 inconceivable matters. One of them is what is actually experienced when you're in the jhanas. So like right now, I can sit here and I can describe to you what the jhanas are, and I can help you to understand it as much as possible, but your mind can't really conceive what it is that I'm describing until you actually experience it yourself. So the Buddha talks about it as an inconceivable matter, that if you sat here and you tried to dissect every little tiny aspect of what the jhanas are, that it would lead to madness or frustration. That's what he says in his teachings. So it's important to understand the jhanas and know what they are and have a general understanding of them. But if you try to dissect it and know exactly what they are, the Buddha explains that it would lead to madness or frustration. So the Buddha calls this an inconceivable matter, that it's not something that you can actually understand 100% until you're actually experiencing it. So that's what he describes also about the jhanas. He talks about that the jhanas will help you to eliminate the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are 5 things that are going to hinder you from actually getting to enlightenment. And the jhanas are going to help you to be able to reduce those and eliminate those out of the mind. He talks about how meditation leads towards the jhanas, that you need meditation in order to be able to get to these jhanas. But remember, you always need to understand the teachings of the Buddha in totality. So sometimes when people see a particular discourse like that, they might be like, it's meditation that leads to the jhanas. Yes, you need meditation to get to the jhanas, but you also need all these other things over here too. You need to see all the teachings of the Buddha, not just this one discourse, but all of them, to be able to see what actually actually leads to enlightenment and what leads to these jhanas. So meditation leads to the jhanas, but you need other things besides the jhanas as well, or besides meditation as well. The Buddha also talks about one who's in the jhanas, that it helps you to eliminate the selfishness, that by the time you get to the jhanas, you won't have selfishness in regards to dwellings, selfishness with regard to families, material possessions, praise, or in regards to the teachings. I can explain to you guys what this is. He's talking about generosity here, that by the time you get into the jhanas and by the time you get into the first stage of enlightenment, you'll be freely generous with the people around you, that you won't be selfish in regard to dwellings. What this means is that you're willing to share your home with other people. Right now, if you're like, I don't want anybody coming in here and staying with me, this is my space, that's the mind craving and clinging to your house or to your dwelling. But by the time you get into the jhanas and headed towards the first stage of enlightenment, you'd be willing to share where it is that you stay, right? Friends or family that are coming over, you'd be willing to let them stay at your place. Selfishness in regards to families, that you're willing to share with your family and the people that are around you and the family members. Selfishness in regard to material possessions, that you'd be willing to share your material possessions, whatever those are. Food, clothing, shelter, which is the first one. Anything that you have as a material possession, you'd be willing to share it with other people. This is helping your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, to live open-handedly. Because when you have craving, you'll hold on to these things very tightly. You won't want other people to have your material possessions or use your material possessions. But here, you'll be able to let that go and share with others. He says also that you'll be able to eliminate selfishness in regards to praise, that you'd be willing to praise other people and compliment other people. You're not interested in doing that excessively, because if you praise other people excessively, their conceit oftentimes will arise. So if you're going to praise people, there's no harm in that, but just be sure you're not doing it excessively, because that's where you'll see a lot of conceit in the people around you. But by the time you get here, you'll be able to be freely giving of praise, but you're still going to make wise decisions and discernment about when to share that praise and how much of it to share. Because everything the Buddha taught is all based in discernment and wise decision making. So here he's just saying you would be willing to share your praise, but then building that on top of discernment, you would like to pay attention to how much praise you give and when you give praise, because giving that in certain situations, it can allow someone's conceit to arise, and now you need to be around all this conceit. And then selfishness in regards to the teachings that has been eliminated. This is like if you're actually in the jhanas and you're experiencing those enhanced qualities that you're experiencing, you know that it's these teachings that have led to that. And if somebody else had a question for you about the teachings, or they were interested in, a video or a book or something like this, you'd be willing to share it. Right? That you're not going to hold on to it and hide it from people, right? So you'd be willing to share the things that you have. And you wouldn't be interested in doing this where you like insert yourself into people's life and tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing and forcing the teachings onto them. That would be your craving and your conceit if you did that. But instead, you would like to be willing to share, but you do that when people ask you, perhaps. Or there's also skillful ways to try to let people know that there's teachings that will help them, but you're not going to be pushing the teachings onto people. But at least here what the Buddha is talking about is that you're not selfish with the teachings, just holding them for yourself, because you know those enhanced qualities that you're experiencing, and you would like other people to be able to experience those as well. So you're willing to share the teachings with other people, not necessarily as a teacher, but just share. Like if you were sitting at a bus stop and someone's like, hey, do you know anything about the teachings of the Buddha? You're like, yeah, sure. What would you like to know? And they're like, oh, what's his very first teaching? It's like, oh, he teaches the Four Noble Truths, and here's what he teaches. You'd be willing to share that with this person because you understand what it's led to, which is this enhanced quality of mind of the jhanas. Okay, so these are some of the words of the Buddha about the jhanas. And here I'm just kind of showing it with the reference here in case anybody would like the reference. These are some of the discourses that I actually was just mentioning, and here's the reference to that. So getting to the jhanas, that's the time to start focusing on the 10 fetters, right? this is what's going to help you to progress into the stages of enlightenment. But while you're focusing on the jhanas, you need to maintain your practice of the Eightfold Path. If you slack off or become complacent on practicing the Eightfold Path, your mind's going to regress out of the jhanas. So why I talk about pivoting and starting to focus on the 10 fetters more closely, that's not to say that you don't pay attention to the Eightfold Path, because you still need to practice the Eightfold Path and continue to develop your mind through the Eightfold Path. It's just now that you've got a second thing to now focus on, which is the 10 fetters. So you still need to keep your Eightfold Path well underway as you're progressing through the jhanas. So ensure to work towards elimination of complacency and conceit, because those are two things that can arise really easily in the jhanas, and we've already talked about that. So make sure you're focused on that. Understand that you're not done yet, that the real work has actually just begun, because now you're starting to experience those enhanced qualities of mind, and you know the teachings that you're learning are absolutely working. You're going to see little incremental improvements. Even I've had students as short as 2 days. They've noticed improvements to their way that they're processing the world around them after just learning in 2 days. So you're going to notice incremental improvement as you're going. But when you get to the jhanas, this is like the first real big thing, because here you have words in front of you from this individual who spoke those words 2,500 years ago. And you've been learning and practicing his teachings for several months and maybe even years. And now you're starting to experience the very qualities that he's describing from 2,500 years ago. This is where it gets really real, really quick. And you're like, oh my goodness, these words are true. This is exactly what I'm experiencing. And he actually described it 2,500 years ago. And remember, when he described it, it wasn't written down. It wasn't written down until shortly after his death. And now here you are with a document in front of you that you're experiencing the exact thing that he taught. And this is where it gets real quick. So this is like the first big major step to indicate to you, oh my goodness, this stuff is actually truly working. I can do this. I can make my way to enlightenment. This is actually possible. I can do this. So you'll experience incremental improvement, but it's the jhanas that are like the real big impactful thing, the first real big impactful thing as you're making your way forward. So the real work has really just begun. You're not done yet. Even as pleasurable as those jhanas are, there's a lot more beyond that. So the light bulb's flickering. Don't let it go out. Stay focused with determination, dedication, and diligence, and continue to practice what got you to the jhanas, which is the Eightfold Path, right? You still need to pay attention to that. So what I like to do to kind of end out this talk about the jhanas is see what questions you guys have about the Eightfold Path, because that's what's going to lead to the jhanas. And I would like to give you guys an opportunity to tweak any understanding that you need about the Eightfold Path, because I've taught this at many different times and you guys have been studying this. So I'd like to see if you guys have any questions on the Eightfold Path. So if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions, or here you can use the microphones.
Yeah, I have a question about one particular concept that I not quite understand, and I actually don't know the translation of this concept to English, but I know in Pali they call it paticca samuppada.
I don't know Pali, so I'm not going to be able to help you. That's why I suggested to you to learn in English.
Yeah, I mean, paticca samuppada, maybe I can try to translate it on English from Russian. It's like one action causes another action, and it's like something like that.
Yeah, this is the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. Every decision that you make, it's going to produce a result. And this is the natural law that you're awakening to as part of your journey to enlightenment. When we talk about awakening, it means to cultivate wisdom about the natural laws. So that's one of the core natural laws that you're awakening to, is this natural law of karma, of cause and effect. So you need to be able to see that more and more clearly, because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another comes back to that. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not mystical and magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's about seeing that the decisions that you make are going to lead to a certain result. And when you make decisions wisely, they're going to produce wholesome karma or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. So you need to get more and more familiar with this natural law. And all the book series that I share, all the classes that I teach in one way or another are helping you to be able to see that natural law.
But as about the karma, I'm wondering what are the bases? What kind of intention do you need to obtain to say that, I made this decision based on wholesome qualities? Like, should it be generosity or something else?
So the wholesome qualities that you're working to cultivate in the mind that's going to produce wholesome karma is generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Those are the three wholesome roots. The unwholesome roots that these are antidoting is craving, anger, and ignorance. And I don't know if you've learned these from me before, but craving is that longing, yearning, the selfishness, the unquenchable thirst that the mind is chasing after things. And if it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings. And then there's the anger. When the anger is arising, that's where the mind becomes unskillful and it pushes people away. It's bitter, harsh, and hostile, or it puts your expectations on people and tries to control people. And where all that's coming from is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom in the mind, the confusion and misunderstanding. So because of the ignorance, the craving and anger continues. So as you're gradually bringing that down through the Eightfold Path, which includes meditation training, the 5 precepts, and all the other training that the Buddha teaches you, you're bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance. You're gradually increasing the wholesome qualities of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, because these are exact opposites. Because craving is the longing, yearning, and holding on to things tightly. Generosity is giving and sharing with the people around you, living open-handedly. The anger, the hatred, the bitterness, the hostility, the opposite of that is being loving and kind, having a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. So loving kindness is going to antidote that anger. And then the opposite of the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality is wisdom, and starting to make more and more decisions through the wisdom of these natural laws. So when you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. When you make decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it's going to produce wholesome karma or wholesome results. So those are the wholesome qualities that you're building up, because that's what's going to produce more and more wholesomeness in your life. But you need this Eightfold Path to be able to do that, because just saying, practice generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Okay, well, how do I do that? That's what the Eightfold Path is teaching you how to do in all aspects of your life.
Okay, I'm wondering, the concept of middle path is applicable to what you just said about 3 generosity, loving kindness, meditation, and what was the third one? Wisdom, yeah.
So I don't think about the teachings of the Buddha as concepts, but I understand that some people use that terminology. I think of it as a teaching, right? Because a concept is kind of like, well, it's just kind of out there. I'm not really sure if it's true or false, but I know with 100% certainty these teachings lead exactly where the Buddha said that they do. So I think of them as teachings, and he's describing these natural laws. And the thing that's going to lead to the generosity, the loving kindness, and the wisdom is the Eightfold Path. And when he talks about the middle way, he's describing the Eightfold Path. You can see it if you look in Volume 1, Chapter 6. I have the exact words of the Buddha where he explains the Eightfold Path is the middle way. That's the middle way, because the mind's craving, longing, yearning, that's the chasing, that's over here. But then when the mind swings to the other side, it's dull, it's lethargic, it's lacking motivation, initiative, and a willingness to do something. That's the 2 opposite sides of the spectrum. But the Eightfold Path is going to hone the mind and bring it to the middle. and you would like to apply this middle way of doing things in all aspects of your life, whether it's personal relationships or your finances or the maintenance of a home or any of these kinds of things, you would like to do all these things from the middle way. And that's where the peace and the joy is. Because if you crave and crave and crave, you're not going to be peaceful there. But if you're dull and lethargic, you're not peaceful there either. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes people are surprised to hear that I play video games. Me and my son, we play video games. He has a PlayStation 5, right? So I'll go home sometimes and we'll play video games, right? And I might play for an hour or two, who knows? But then I'm also spending time here helping you guys. And I'm also online helping people. And I'm also helping my wife. And I'm also maintaining my house and maintaining my car. So I'm balancing all these things, right? Whereas if I was like excessively playing video games, where maybe 6, 8, 10 hours a day, that would be excessive. That's the mind's craving, desire, attachment. But also, if I swung all the way over to this other side, where I just sat around on the sofa, I didn't do anything, I was just dull and lethargic, there's no peacefulness there either. So there's this middle way with all factors of the Eightfold Path being implemented. Now, whether it's video games or maintaining your home or your finances or your personal and professional relationships, you can do it all from the middle way, where you're balancing your life, essentially is what the Buddha teaches you.
Why I've been asking about the middle path is applicable to these three teachings is that, for example, you said about anger, and the opposite of anger is generosity, right? Loving kindness.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I go to anger, like to radically to anger, it's not good. But also, if I go to radically loving kindness, it can be also not good. So I need to find a middle way.
That's not applying the middle way properly, the way that the Buddha taught it. So there's wholesome qualities and there's unwholesome qualities. You need to completely eliminate all the unwholesome qualities. That's a purification of the mind. And you need to fully cultivate and permeate the wholesome qualities in the mind. And what's going to allow you to fully permeate the wholesome qualities in the mind is the middle way. The Eightfold Path is going to help you to eliminate the unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome. And now you're practicing the middle way.
Yeah, I think more the better example of that will be about generosity and the opposite of generosity. For example, I can definitely imagine the radical generosity where people just giving away everything they can, and it's also not good. So you need to focus on the wisdom first, maybe, or just doing all three together at the same time.
Yeah, so with each one of these things, there is a middle way. So like with generosity, if you were giving and sharing extensively, you wouldn't have what you need. But also if you were on the other side where you were never sharing, your mind's going to be quite selfish. So when I teach generosity, I teach people to do it from the middle way. Same thing, like let's use something like compassion. Loving kindness is not so different than compassion, but let's use compassion because this is a good example. If somebody lacked compassion, they would be indifferent, because what compassion is concern for the misfortune of others, right? That's what compassion is, concern for the misfortune of others. If you were indifferent, where you could care less about what happens to people, you're just like, I don't care about that homeless guy. It's not my friend. It's not my family. That's their karma. Who cares that they're sleeping on the street? That's indifference. The mind's lacking compassion. But if you're all the way on the other side of this, oh my goodness, there's homeless people that don't have a house. Oh, I'm so worried. I'm having anxiety now, right? This is on the complete opposite side. So whenever you're hearing what the Buddha is teaching you, he's always teaching you to practice from the middle way, right? But it's not like there's a middle between craving in generosity. That's not what you're trying to get to. You're not trying to get between those two things. Practicing generosity is the middle way. Practicing compassion is the middle way, for example, and you need to make sure you're not indifferent and you're not worried and having anxiety. Now your mind's in the middle with compassion. With generosity, you're not giving excessively where you don't have what you need, but you're also not selfish and never giving either. You're coming to the middle where you can give and share and being joyful and sharing with others. And that's the middle way. So each one of these topics, there's always a middle way for you to practice. And that's where you'll experience the peace and the joy. Because if you're holding on to what you have in terms of material possessions tightly, you're going to be selfish. But if you're giving excessively, you're not going to have what you need. And there's no peace and joy on either side of that. So that's where you come to the middle. That's where the peace and joy is.
Thank you very much. And I have another question. It's a more simple question. I remember you said about Jhānas that everyone can obtain it, right? I wonder, what about other animals besides the human beings? Can they experience Jhānas?
Animals aren't able to experience the jhanas. They can cultivate their mind to a certain degree, but they're usually doing that mostly with human intervention, right? Animals left to their own devices, they're actually quite untamed. They have, these pollutions of their mind, and they're not able to fully cultivate their mind to the level of the jhanas. A human being can do that, but an animal is incapable. So what I said is everyone who can learn, reflect, and practice are able to experience the jhanas. That's what I mentioned. So even in the human realm, there's individuals who can experience the jhanas, because let's just say they have a certain deficiency with their brain and their mind, and they're not able to intellectually learn certain content, and they're not able to reflect on that content, and they're not able to practice it. They wouldn't be able to experience the jhanas in this particular life. Now, they might actually get to enlightenment at death in this life, but they're not going to be able to experience the jhanas and enlightenment during their life. So let's just say this person doesn't get to enlightenment at death because they weren't able to intellectually learn and examine and investigate the teachings. They weren't able to reflect, and they weren't able to practice. So they didn't get to the jhanas or enlightenment in this life, but now they can be reborn and potentially experience that in a future life. So there's even human beings that can't actually experience the jhanas. So it's anybody who can learn, reflect, and practice that is able to then experience these enhanced qualities of mind and ultimately enlightenment itself. But animals aren't able to do that. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So what I'm going to do here...
One question.
Oh, we have a question? Okay.
Yeah. Is there any shortcut to know when to act out of compassion?
You should always have compassion. That's what you would like to get to, where your mind is permeating with compassion, and there's never a time where there's no compassion in the mind. So you would always like to have compassion. If you're practicing it from the middle way, you can always have this concern for the misfortune of others. It's a mental state. It's not that you're actually doing anything. So like using that example of the homeless person, the compassion isn't that you choose to give them food. The mental state is that you have concern for this misfortune that the person has. Now your generosity, that mental state, is kicking in, and you're choosing to give them food. And now you're practicing an action to actually give them the food. But the compassion itself isn't the action. It's just the mental state. So for example, I used to ride a motorbike, and I would sometimes see somebody crash on a motorbike, and I would pull over, I would stop, and I would help that person. Right? This was coming from my compassion. It was also my generosity, but then my right action was helping them. I would have bodily actions to help them. But there was other times I'd be driving down the road on a motorbike, and I would see an accident, and I would keep driving. I still had compassion. I just looked at the situation, and in that particular situation, there was 2 or 3 people already helping them. I had some food that I was taking home to my son, and he had been at home all day by himself without food. And I knew that I needed to get this food to him because it was like 3 p.m., 4 p.m. And he had been at home all day without food. I was like, all right, sweet. This person has 2 or 3 people to help them. They don't need my help. I'm going to keep driving. But I still had compassion, because I looked to make sure that they had somebody to help them. And then I just kept driving. And my compassion for that person was there, but also my compassion for my son was there too. And I decided to keep on going and help my son because this person already had help. So you would like to have compassion in every situation, but whether you act upon that compassion is a separate question and a separate decision.
And the same would apply to more societal causes or problems?
Same thing.
Yeah.
You can always have compassion. So like when I watch the news, like I see the war in Ukraine or anywhere else, or I see famine or poverty, I have compassion in those situations, but I can't do anything to fix that. It's just not possible. I can't put any action behind that that's going to actually fix it. What I can do is I can share these teachings, right? So that people can come here and they can learn and they can grow and they can develop. And maybe some of those people have the ability to take action in those places. So the action that I'm choosing to have based in my compassion is to share these teachings, because I know that's the very best thing I could ever do. Because, for example, using the example of a homeless person, you can't feed somebody out of homelessness. You can't feed somebody out of hunger, right? Because if they became reliant on me for food, now they're attached to me. They're not truly out of poverty. They're not truly out of their hunger because they haven't figured out how to make wise decisions to get that food for themselves. Right? So the best way to help somebody is to help them cultivate wisdom. And now when they cultivate wisdom, they can make decisions to find the food themselves, where I can't go out into the world and feed 8 billion people in the world. But I can give 8 billion people the teachings to train their mind to get the wisdom that they then use to create a better life for themselves. So that's what I put my time and effort into, based on my compassion, is sharing the teachings with people and then doing it for free, right? Putting it on YouTube, putting it on podcasts, giving away books for free, giving away all my classes for free, even my personal guidance. Just give it to anybody and everybody who would like to have it without any expectation. And this is the best way for me to be able to help the world, because I can't feed somebody out of hunger, but I can teach them wisdom to train their mind to then be able to make better and better decisions for themselves. And that's going to get them out of hunger, out of poverty, and out of homelessness. Yep.
Yeah, now I have one more question about compassion. To begin with, I should say most of my lifetime I've been living in village in Ukraine, and the winters in Ukraine are very, very hard sometimes. So people in village, they don't have actual work. They have their own household with animals, some plant-based products, whatever. And my uncle, he was like forced to kill some animals because he need to prepare meat for winter. But every time he does that, I seen the tears in his eyes, and I asked, "Why do you have these tears? You do this every year." And he said, "Even though I kill these animals, every year I do this with compassion, like because I know they're living beings and I'm killing them, but still I can feel like I've been living with these animals for several years, and they're like my friends and all, but I should kill them to eat their meat, and that's all of that stuff." I wonder what karma does he have because of these actions?
Okay, so a couple things there is, first, he's not being forced to kill those animals. That's a choice that he's making. He's choosing to kill those animals. The second thing is that there's a misunderstanding in his mind about what compassion is, because it's not compassion that's he's killing the animals with. You wouldn't kill an animal for food based in compassion. And it's also not the compassion that's causing his sadness and his tears. That's not what causes that. Compassion doesn't cause sadness and tears. So those are misunderstandings that the mind has in those situations. The karma that he's experiencing is there's a certain amount of craving, there's a certain amount of anger, there's a certain amount of ignorance in the mind in order to be able to do those kinds of things. And I used to do those kinds of things too. I used to work on a farm and I used to kill animals when I was very young. And you'll experience unwholesome karma as a result. Exactly What type of unwholesome karma? The Buddha says that to try to discern exactly the unwholesome karma would lead to madness or frustration. We can talk generally about what somebody will experience, but we can't say exactly. So for these kinds of situations, somebody could experience disease or illness that you pick up from the animals, because killing animals, having blood around, there can be bacterias and viruses that you're picking up from the animal realm. This is how we got COVID and mad cow disease, swine flu, bird flu, all these different things. This is all coming from the animal world, and it comes from us killing animals and now interacting with the animals. That's one thing. If you eat the meat, it can cause sickness in the physical body and in the mind as well. The mind's not going to be so well. When I worked on a farm and we were killing animals, there's a certain amount of ill will that we had towards the animals because of our killing of them. We were doing it for the job that we were doing, but nonetheless, in this environment, there was a lot of hostility and bitterness, and we would sometimes fight. We would go into the barn in the horse stalls and we would fight, and this was part of our unwholesome karma of being in that kind of environment. So there's multiple things that could be occurring, but you can't say exactly because each situation's a little bit different. But these are just some examples of what somebody will experience. Sickness, illness, disease. He probably has some guilt and shame and fear in his mind. That's part of what he'll experience. Ultimately, if he continues to kill, what the Buddha explains is that you're going to have a shortened lifespan as a result of this. Because in order to kill, there has to be a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, which is producing stress and anxiety and guilt and shame in the mind. And now this puts a strain on the bodily organs, and now this shortens a person's lifespan. So these are some of the things that can be experienced as a result of repeatedly killing living beings. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share with you guys this next part, which is understanding and experiencing the 4 stages of enlightenment, the complete end of discontentedness. I taught some of this on Sunday, but now I'm going to go through it in a little bit different way. The 4 stages of the mind progressing through the stages of enlightenment, this is coming after the jhanas. This is what the 4 stages of enlightenment are. Is there 4 distinct stages that the mind goes through as it makes its way to enlightenment itself. The 4th stage of enlightenment is where the mind is actually enlightened. So after the jhanas, the mind's going to progress through these 4 stages of enlightenment. You can look at the 4 stages of enlightenment as a personal growth plan, because the Buddha essentially shows you the fetters that you need to eliminate in order to make your way through those 4 stages of enlightenment. So it's a personal growth plan to be able to get to the point where your mind is completely eliminated all discontentedness. The stages of enlightenment are goals and objectives that you can progress towards, and you would like to do that with an aspiration, with a goal as an objective, as an interest. Whereas if you were craving and longing and yearning for these stages of enlightenment, you're not going to actually be able to experience them. So you'd like to come to the middle, even with something like progressing towards the 4 stages of enlightenment. Whereas if you were craving and longing and yearning, chasing after this, or if you were on the other side where you could care less about your growth and your development in this world, you're not going to actually be able to progress and have peace and joy. So I'd like to come to the middle where you're gradually working towards these as goals, objectives, or interests to be able to experience more and more increased levels of peacefulness, calmness, serenity, and contentedness with joy. As I mentioned, it's the 4th stage of enlightenment, which is where the mind is actually enlightened. And this can be attained during your life. And then that's a permanent mental state that your mind will be in for the rest of this life. You can also attain enlightenment at death as well. That's not ideal, but that's the next best option, because at least you're not going to experience rebirth. But by getting to enlightenment prior to death, you get to experience the rest of your life in that enlightened mental state. And even if you get to enlightenment in the last 1 minute of your life, the last 5 minutes of your life, that'll be the best 1 minute or 5 minutes that you've ever experienced. So there's no harm in continuing to work towards this goal. And if you fall short of it for any reason and you die unenlightened, then there's a future rebirth that would be improved. But ultimately, you would like to apply effort and energy to be able to get to enlightenment in this life. And it's not like your mind is unenlightened and then there's a switch that flips and now you're enlightened. So even if you got to enlightenment in the last 1 minute of your life, you were actually experiencing enhanced qualities all the way to that point. Because even in the third stage of enlightenment, as you guys are going to hear, you can sometimes get 2, 3, even 6 months of complete peace and joy in your mind. But then you're going to experience a bit of discontentedness. So even if you get to enlightenment in that last 1 minute of your life, it's going to be the best 1 minute of your life. Once the mind enters into the first stage of enlightenment, it will not regress backwards from there. It's not possible for it to do that. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind's securely in that first stage. And if you die in that stage, you won't be reborn into the lower realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits. So some people, they set their goals on getting to the first stage of enlightenment. I don't suggest you do that. I suggest you set your goal on getting to enlightenment. And then if you fall short of that, okay, you're in the first, second, or third stage of enlightenment. But if you set your goal at the first stage of enlightenment, if you fall short of that, you're in the jhanas and you're not where you potentially need to be. So it's best to set your sights on enlightenment itself. It's like the old adage, if you shoot for the moon, if you miss, at least you'll be among the stars, right? It's the same kind of thing. Okay, so this is what the 4 stages of enlightenment are. The way that you experience the 4 stages of enlightenment is through eliminating the fetters. They're referred to as a fetter because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a prisoner and they were trying to keep you confined in a certain area, they would put a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle. This is a fetter, right? And that would keep you confined in that area. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells or prison cells. During his lifetime, they would put a fetter around your ankle, a shackle, a chain, and a ball, and they would just keep you in an open field. So when the Buddha discovered these 10 pollutions, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state. And it's through purifying the mind of these 10 fetters that the mind is now liberated. It's free. Now the mind is completely peaceful and joyful. So you're making your way through the 4 stages of enlightenment by eliminating these fetters. And I'm going to be talking about each one of these throughout the rest of this retreat. Starting this evening at 6:30, I'm going to spend an entire class session explaining to you what personal existence view is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So I'm not going to talk about these anymore here, other than to explain to you that these are the 10 pollutions of the mind, the defilements or the taints. And this is what you're working to eliminate. And it's through the Eightfold Path that is gradually bringing these fetters down that you start experiencing the jhanas. Right? And now, if you continue to focus on these and completely eradicate them out of the mind, now you start moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. So now, I'm going to talk about these 4 stages, that what you're going to experience as you're moving through these 4 stages. Okay? So the first stage of enlightenment, it's referred to as a stream enter, and you will need to eliminate the first 3 fetters. There's some other things that you need to accomplish in addition to this. And I teach a retreat every January where I share everything you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But mainly what you're looking at is to eliminate these first 3 fetters. But there's plenty of other things that you need to learn and grow and develop in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So for example, you would need to understand dependent origination. You would need to be able to have accomplishment and generosity. You would need to pay careful attention to your decisions. You would need to cultivate wholesome friends and wholesome companions. You would need to be practicing the Eightfold Path really, really well. There are different things that you would need beyond just these particular fetters. But this is like the real direct things that you're looking at is to eliminate these 3 fetters. Having eliminated these 3 fetters and accomplished all the other things that you need to get into the first stage of enlightenment, this is what you're going to experience. That these are actually from the words of the Buddha, the first 6. That one is fixed in the wholesome teachings. What this means is that by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you don't have doubt any longer. You don't have doubt about these teachings. You know with 100% certainty that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind in your life. You'll have no doubt about that. Early in your journey, you might have doubt. You might doubt whether this person, the Buddha, lived. You might doubt whether these teachings actually work or not. That's normal. You can turn this into an inquisitive mind where you investigate the teachings. You don't eliminate your doubt about the teachings through blind belief, but through investigating and examining the teachings, through reflecting on them to independently verify them, and through practicing them. And when you see the improved condition of your mind in your life, you'll know that you're headed in the right direction because you see these enhanced qualities of mind through the jhanas and when you get into the first stage of enlightenment. And that's why the Buddha says you will be fixed in these wholesome teachings, because you will know your mind's not enlightened yet, but boy, have you seen significant progress, and you're fixed in learning and growing and developing on this path. One is incapable of decline. As I was sharing, once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, it's impossible for you to regress backwards. One's discontentedness is limited. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, the discontentedness that you're experiencing is just a mere fraction of what it once was when you were off the path to enlightenment. Just a mere fraction. You're still experiencing discontentedness, but it's significantly reduced by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. You're going to notice certain situations where you used to get angry and frustrated and agitated and annoyed. You don't have that any longer. That is just not there. That you have that same exact situation. You're like, whoa. The minds are like really calm in this situation. There's no discontentedness whatsoever. So you're going to notice less discontentedness. In some situations where you had a lot of anger and a lot of frustration, you're going to notice that it's minimal, that maybe you're just a little annoyed or you dislike that situation, right? That's in the first stage of enlightenment. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't even have that. But in the first stage of enlightenment, there'll be some situations where you don't experience any discontentedness at all, where you used to experience discontentedness. That's the reduction of your discontentedness. And there's going to be other situations where you used to get really discontent, where now you just a little bit irritated, just a little bit frustrated, right? So your discontentedness is limited in the first stage of enlightenment. You will come to possess wisdom not shared by others. You will see other people struggling and having difficulties in the world, that things that are just so easy and simple for you, that other people are really struggling with those things, right? So this is where the conceit can come into the mind, and you need to be really careful here, because you're going to see people that are really struggling and having difficulties, but you have wisdom that would make that so simple and so easy, right? So there's certain wisdom that you're going to have. Like, for example, something very simple, the universal truth of impermanence. There's so many people in the world that just don't understand that, right? They're craving permanence, right? And you'll understand the universal truth of impermanence. The Four Noble Truths. There's so many people in the world that just don't understand that their own mind is causing their discontent feelings. They're completely pleased to blame their feelings on other people. But you're going to know that that's not true, that that person's feelings are being caused by their own mind. You're going to see people being bitter and harsh and hostile, gossiping and slandering, and you're going to know how unwise that is and how that leads to unwholesome results in people's lives. So people are going to be doing these things, and you're going to have wisdom that they don't have. In fact, you might even start feeling like the black sheep a little bit in certain situations where other people are doing all these unwise things and you're choosing not to do those things, because you're going to have this wisdom to realize how unwise it is. You're going to have clearly seen causation. What this means is that you will have clearly seen the natural law of karma, the cause and effect, the action and result. You can see it very clearly within your own life because you've studied the natural law close enough, and now you see it playing out day to day, every situation, watching the news in your own life, your neighbors, your family. You can see the natural law of karma clearly. You will have clearly seen it. Your mind isn't fully awake to it by the time you're in the first stage of enlightenment, but you've seen that it's true and you've confirmed that it's true. One has clearly seen causally arisen objects. What this is that you understand dependent origination. This is a teaching that I'm going to teach you on Friday in this retreat, where it's 12 interlinking steps that is showing you exactly why you experience discontentedness and why you experience rebirth over and over and over again. So this is the deepest, highest level teaching of the Buddha, and I'm going to share that on Friday. So you will have seen that clearly, these causally arisen objects. And then I added this seventh one here just for my list. In the discourse, I didn't add it, of course. I didn't change the words of the Buddha. But essentially what I share with people when you get to the first stage of enlightenment is that you have everything you need to make your way to the a fourth stage of enlightenment, to actually attain enlightenment. One of the ways you might think about the first stage of enlightenment is it's like base camp at Mount Everest. You've acquired everything you need to be at the base camp of Mount Everest. You're not going to stumble into base camp at Mount Everest. You've been on other hikes. You've tested equipment. You've done different things to build your knowledge and build your wisdom. And now you're at the base camp of Mount Everest. You have the ability to get to the summit, but you're not there yet. But you have everything you need. You have all the equipment, you have the guides, you have the wisdom, you have the know-how, you have everything you need. You're at base camp of Mount Everest, but you just haven't got to the summit yet, right? And you're not going to stumble your way into base camp at Mount Everest. There's been intention for multiple years building up to that point where you're now at base camp at Mount Everest. So it's the same thing, that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you've gathered up all the teachings, the resources, the teacher, your practice of the Eightfold Path, you're experiencing the jhanas. You're not enlightened yet, and you still need guidance beyond the first stage of enlightenment, but you've got everything you need at this point to be able to make your way to enlightenment. Okay? So this is the first stage of enlightenment. And by the way, if you die in this first stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the world no more than 7 times, but you're going to come back into the human realm. It doesn't mean you have to come back into the world. It just means if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back into the human world, but you'll only do that a maximum of 7 times before you actually get to enlightenment. So someone could basically get to the first stage of enlightenment and go all the way through to enlightenment in this life, right? But perhaps if you were learning these teachings in a past life, maybe you got to the first stage of enlightenment and you died, and now you've come back into the human world to now work on this some more, right? So that's what this is talking about. Now, once you have eliminated the first 3 fetters, if you've thinned out number 4 and 5, you're now in the second stage of enlightenment. This is called once returner. And by the way, the reason why this is called stream enterer is because just like a log enters the stream and it's going to eventually get to the ocean, it's the same thing that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to eventually get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. That's why it's called stream enterer. Today, we might just call it the first stage of enlightenment. And the second stage of enlightenment is called once returner because if you die here, you're going to come back into the human world one more time before you get to enlightenment. But today, we might just call this the second stage of enlightenment, right? So some of you guys might have been in a once returner in your past life. So this person would have already eliminated the first 3 fetters and they've thinned out number 4 and 5. So if you're noticing perhaps that you're not as interested in sex anymore, this is a diminishing of sensual desire. Or if you're noticing that your anger and your frustration and your ill will isn't as strong as it was in the past, this is a thinning out of ill will. Okay, so as somebody is starting to thin this out, that's where the sensual desire and ill will is being thinned out. And just because you're experiencing the thinning out of these things doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment. There's plenty of other things that you need to accomplish to be able to get into that second stage of enlightenment. So having gotten into the second stage of enlightenment, one's discontentedness will be significantly reduced even more. So all those same benefits of the first stage of enlightenment, now you're also experiencing these where there's even more limiting of the discontentedness. And if you die in this stage of enlightenment, then you will come back into the world one more time as a human being, and you'll get to enlightenment in that life. Okay. Now, the third stage of enlightenment is referred to as a non-returner, because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will not come back to the human world. You will actually be born in the heavenly world, and you will attain enlightenment there, because that's not a permanent existence. Sometimes people believe a bunch of things, and they hope something good happens when you die. They think the goal is to get to heaven, but that's not the actual goal, because the heavenly realm is not permanent. You can't reside there permanently. You can see the world around you. Everything is constantly changing, that it is impermanent. But if you die here, you'll go to the heavenly realm and you'll get to enlightenment in that life, right? So an individual who's gotten to this third stage of enlightenment, they've eliminated the first 3 or all 5 fetters of the lower fetters: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. And they're experiencing all the same benefits of the first and second stage of enlightenment, But now their discontentedness is nearly non-existent. Maybe once every 3 months, once every 6 months, they're having a little bit of discontentedness. It's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it's occurring. You'll know exactly why it's occurring and you'll be able to get rid of it, but it's still occurring because the mind still has some pollutions in the mind. So you're going to need to pay attention because the mind can be complacent in this stage of enlightenment. So the discontentedness is nearly non-existent. And if somebody does die here, they're going to experience rebirth in the heavenly world. So it's important to remain dedicated, determined, and diligent in this stage of enlightenment. And there's the potential for conceit to arise here. Excuse me. Because conceit is still in the mind in the third stage of enlightenment. Then the fourth stage of enlightenment, it's referred to as an arahant. An arahant has completely purified their mind. They've eliminated all the 10 fetters. We would refer to this person as enlightened or an enlightened being. This is the fourth stage of enlightenment. The benefits here is, of course, all the other benefits that we were talking about, and they have completely eliminated all their discontentedness. They don't even experience the slightest ickiness in their mind. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, no discontentedness, not even the slightest little ickiness in the mind. And if when an individual dies in the fourth stage of enlightenment, there's no rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. What comes next for an enlightened being? The Buddha leaves it as an undeclared teaching. He doesn't describe what comes next. And he intentionally does that for a reason, because the goal is to get to peace and joy in this life. It's not to long and yearn for what comes next. So if the mind is enlightened, you're completely content and completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment. Your mind's not longing and yearning for what's next. So he didn't teach what does come next or what doesn't come next. He just left it as an undeclared teaching. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's so peaceful and so joyful, you're not going to care what's next, if there's anything at all that's next. He just left it as an undeclared teaching. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. Do you guys have any questions on the 4 stages of
enlightenment? I have a question about the first stage of enlightenment. I remember I talked to you about it like 2 weeks ago, but I still not quite understand about 7 returns. I mean, how can we even like prove it? For example, you always say not to base on beliefs. But to experience it for yourself. But how actually can you do this in this situation?
Sure. If you get to the point where you have observed your past lives and you know what those past lives are, you can actually independently verify this. So for example, I know that I lived in 2 previous human lives before this, and countless animals before that. So I know in the first life and in the second life what I was doing and what I was practicing in terms of teachings, and I know where I'm at today. So I have been able to confirm essentially what the Buddha teaches about the first stage of enlightenment is that it's impossible to experience an 8th existence by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. So that's the way I worded it, that no more than 7 existences in the first stage of enlightenment. So I know where I was in those first 2 lives, and I know where I am now. So I know that there isn't going to be an 8th existence, right? So this is how I was able to confirm it, but it's up to each individual. If they experience observing their past lives, then they'll be able to confirm it. But not everybody is going to see their past lives. So this is something that you might come to. Let's just say you never observe your past lives, but you make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. And now you know that you're experiencing those qualities of mind. You'll get to the point where you might just be like, you know what? I've never confirmed the number 7. But you have enough confidence that the teachings of the Buddha have led you to the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment, that you know what, that number 7, the Buddha's teachings were 100% true in all other respects. So this one here, I'll take it on face value and I'll confirm that, yes, this must be true, because otherwise the Buddha wouldn't have taught it, because everything else that he taught led exactly where he said it does. So now you might just take that on face value. But for me, this is how I confirmed it, is through being able to observe past lives. But not everybody's going to have that experience.
Yeah, and also I wonder, is it a thing in the Buddha teaching, like, is he talking about how can you practice to see your past lives?
You're not intending to force the mind to see your past lives. He's not explaining to you how to force the mind to do that, because that's not what you're interested in. You're not interested in longing, yearning, or craving to be able to see your past lives. But instead, what you'll notice is that as you're practicing the Eightfold Path and you're getting rid of these pollutions, if your mind is going to have those memories, it will happen. And the way that it happens is through reducing your pollutions. Because when your mind's polluted, all you can see is like what's in front of you, essentially. But when your mind is eliminating these pollutions, it's like moving to a higher consciousness. It's like moving to a higher vantage point on top of a mountain. And now you can see how all these towns and cities connect to each other. So even though the Buddha doesn't talk about this specifically, I can tell you the way that the mind experiences observing past lives is just by doing the path, is by learning and practicing the path, getting rid of the pollutions of mind. If you're going to see your past lives, it will happen as a result of getting rid of these pollutions. But it's not something that you would force the mind or try to convince the mind to do. Instead, you just practice the path. And if you start having these residual memories, you'll know what that is, which is from your past life. But not everybody will experience that.
Okay, thank you very much. And usually I don't like to talk about myself, but I'm really curious in this particular situation. I thought I had some kind of vision after I ate some psilocybin mushrooms that I experienced my past lives. But at that time I thought it's more like a drug dependent something happened. But then I discovered a theory that the Buddha actually, his first meal after his ascetic lifestyle, it was a rice bowl made out of milk of some sacred cows. And the theory says that these sacred cows were hanging around in the area where psilocybin mushrooms were growing. They ate these mushrooms, and that's why their milk had these psychoactive chemicals. And Buddha ate this rice bowl, and he experienced the ego death, the past life experiences, and all of that stuff I've been experienced when I ate the psilocybin mushrooms. But then it just eventually got away from me, and I wonder, is it a thing? What do you think about this theory?
Are you saying that you heard that the Buddha ate psychedelic mushrooms?
As I said, it was not like the mushroom itself. It was a rice cake, rice bowl,
I see.
made out of milk, like boiled milk.
Yeah.
And
this is the challenge with hearsay, is that it's just rumors. There's nothing that the Buddha talks about any of that in the Pali Canon. And if you experience these things for yourself, you'll see how it works, that it's not from psychedelic mushrooms or the remnants of them. That's not how you experience the death of the ego. That's not how you experience past lives. You actually need to actively work to eliminate the ego through eliminating the pollutions of the mind. And then as you're doing that, that's where you see your past lives, if it's going to happen. But it's not induced by a psychedelic substance. And that's the challenge with trying to induce it or forcing your mind to experience these things, is you can't really have confidence that it's true. But when you're just eliminating the pollutions of your mind and it happens, then you can have confidence in it. Like if you're having constant residual memories of being murdered in a past life, and you're not taking psychedelic mushrooms, and all you've been doing is training your mind, you'll have confidence that this is past life memories. Whereas if you're doing those other things, you can't have confidence in those things. So the way to eliminate your ego and the way to observe past lives is not through any kind of substance. That's not the way that those things would occur. But there's active training that you can do to eliminate those things and get to the point where if you're going to have memories of past lives, you will have that. Mm-hmm.
I think this theory I was talking about, it was based on the translation of Pali Canon to English, and it was kind of word that this meal, rice meal, was made out of milk from sacred cows. And this word sacred, it refers to some Pali word, and they translated it so. And that's how this theory came up.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that people come up with these kinds of things, because I know that it's 100% not true, because I know how these things work. All I can say is that it's unfortunate that people come up with these things, because then it leads people to think that maybe they should do psychedelic mushrooms too, when that's not what's going to lead to an individual's growth and development of their mind and getting to enlightenment.
Yeah, also, if you're I'm interested in the lifetime of Buddha, and this theory goes much further. Some people say the first meal he had this with psilocybin mushrooms, he obtained enlightenment, and the last meal he had, some people say it was meat, but some scholars say it was kind of mushroom that he after died from. And they say it can be a kind of amanita mushroom. It's poisonous mushrooms growing in all around the world almost, and they also contain these psychoactive compounds, but actually they can cause death. And what scholars say in Pali Canon, you can find description of he had a diarrhea right after this meal. And that's also about this kind of mushrooms, if you eat the amanita mushroom. So yeah, I'm not saying anything, it's just what I've heard. And it's also about what I experienced when I actually tried the psilocybin and amanita mushrooms. After each of these experiences, I had some kind of vision of my past lives. That's why I'm so curious about it.
Someone who's taking psychedelic substances, they're not even practicing the fifth precept. They're not anywhere close to even the first stage of enlightenment, let alone enlightenment themselves. Because even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would need to practice the fifth precept for an ongoing period of time. So there's no way that a psychedelic substance can lead to enlightenment itself, because the mind's not even in the first stage of enlightenment by the time you get, if you're still using psychedelic substances. So I know with 100% certainty that the Buddha did not get to enlightenment, did not see past lives, and did not experience the elimination of his ego through psychedelic substances. This just isn't true. And again, it's unfortunate that people have these theories, but that's what they have. And that's the whole reason why they're not experiencing enlightenment themselves, because they're still having these perceptions and these false truths. They haven't actually learned the true teachings of what actually leads to enlightenment. And they're continuing to hold on to these false beliefs, false opinions, and false views. If they let go of those things and they actually learn the true teachings that actually lead to enlightenment, then they can experience enlightenment for themselves, and they'll know with 100% certainty what actually leads to enlightenment. And it's not psychedelic substances.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but I remembered also, I was trying to study the Samyutta Nikaya from the Pali Canon. And the whole Samyutta Nikaya starts with suttas about some kind of gods coming to human realm to talk with Buddha. And it starts with the description that the light comes from the sky. It was Devata coming to talk to Buddha and all of that stuff. And also some scholars say because of in that times, it was very common to eat food with some kind of psychoactive compounds in it. some people could have experienced the like collective hallucinations. And I wonder, what do you think about it?
Okay, so the first thing I'll share, since you've been mentioning the word scholar quite a bit, is you need to understand that scholars and academics, these are the people that actually are interested in the teachings from a historical standpoint, but they're not really interested in them as a practitioner. Typically, they're more interested in how these teachings have affected society and how people think and process the world around them based on this collection of teachings or this particular teacher. So they're less interested in enlightenment itself and actually practicing the teachings, learning and practicing them, and more interested in the historical impact that a collection of teachings have created in the world. If you're not practicing the teachings, you can't actually understand them in a way that you could actually help other people to understand them. So by you relying on scholars and mentioning that frequently, you're actually looking at content of people who aren't actually practicing the teachings. So they're going to have all kinds of false information about what they think the teachings are because they're not actually practicing the teachings. So it's interesting sometimes to see what scholars are saying, but in terms of learning and practicing getting into enlightenment, those would be the last people that you would be interested in looking at what they're actually teaching, because they're not actually practicing the teachings themselves. They're not interested in that. So it's important that you understand that a lot of the hearsay and a lot of the false information that you're getting is because of that, because they're not actually practicing the teachings. The understanding that heavenly beings and gods were communicating with the Buddha, this is actually true. This is real. That can actually happen. And if you ever have these experiences, then you can know that it's true. But for these individuals who are scholars and they're not practicing the teachings, which means their mind has a certain level of pollution, then they're not going to experience those same kind of things that the Buddha experienced and the same kinds of things that was happening around the Buddha. So a Buddha knows that if they're communicating with God, they know what that is and they have full confidence that that's what's going on. Or if they're communicating with heavenly beings, they know what that is and they have full confidence that that's going on. And that ended up getting documented in the Pali Canon, which helps people to understand that this is a real possibility of things that actually does occur. But this scholar who isn't practicing, doesn't even really know the teachings, their mind is still polluted, they're going to look at that and try to come up with other things of what that could be. But for someone who's actually experienced these kinds of things, they understand that, yeah, this is true. This is the way the world actually works, is that God can communicate with you. Heavenly beings can communicate with you, not just a Buddha, but even with just an average human being. And when you're training your mind and getting less and less pollution in the mind, these things are more and more likely to occur. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
How long does it take for one's returner to be reborn into a human life?
So all of the rebirths that occur, it's not instantaneous. I saw from my first human life to the second human life, I saw about 500 years. And from my second human life to where I am now, it was about 2,000 years. So it's not instantaneous. Oftentimes people think it is. That's also unfortunate because you have all kinds of things that happen in the world that mislead people. But there's no set definitive amount of time, because if you're in a human life and you're being reborn into a human life, there's an in-between period that you're not instantly reborn, and it's not like a set time frame. But considering I saw as short as 500 years and as long as 2,000, I know that there's probably, things that are shorter than 500, and I know that there's probably some that are longer than 2,000, right? So it can be anywhere in that window of time, but I know it's not instantaneous rebirth. Mm-hmm.
And then for this being that was before a one's returner,
mm-hmm.
is kind of destined to become enlightened, no?
Yeah, that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time, either in that life or some future life. And the same thing for a once returner. When you come back that next time, you will get to enlightenment in that very next birth. So let's just say you were a once returner in your past life. That means in this life, you're going to get to enlightenment. That's what it means to be a once returner. And then the same thing for a non-returner. If you die in that stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment in that heavenly existence, in your very next existence. But ultimately, you would like to just keep focusing on getting to enlightenment as an arahant, as an enlightened being, completely purifying the mind, not just being like, well, I'm a once returner, I'm just going to kind of hang out here. You're not interested in doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You have another question?
Yeah, sorry. I wonder, can you go backwards in time for your next life?
It's not possible because there's only one time, which is right now. There's not like a parallel universe somewhere that is the past. It's just right now. That's the only time there is. You know, we use the clock in order to help us organize our affairs. So like when I teach a class, I say, okay, tonight I'm going to start teaching at 6:30 p.m. That helps you to organize your time and to know when to show up here so that we all have some common way of knowing when to show up here. But it's not like we can go back to the past because the only true time that there is right now. There's no ability to go back to some time in the past because it doesn't exist any longer. The same thing with the future. It hasn't happened yet, so we can't go to it. So why it sounds interesting to visit the future, it's not possible because it hasn't happened yet. The only time that we have is actually right now. That's it. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, how can someone reduce or eliminate personal existence views? I mean, can you give some like general ideas?
I'm going to teach that tonight at 6:30.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you'd like to come back at 6:30, I'm going to start with meditation, and then I'm going to teach that for the class period tonight.
It's like for the 8 fetters, how to get rid of
What I'm
fetters.
going to do on this evening is I'm going to teach this first fetter.
Mm-hmm.
And then this retreat is going on through Friday.
Mm-hmm.
In each class session, I'm going to take one of these fetters. So like tonight,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to teach personal existence view,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then tomorrow in the morning, we're going to do a meditation. But then after the meditation, I'm going to teach how to eliminate doubt. We're going to spend a certain period of time just talking about what is doubt, what are the symptoms of doubt,
Mm-hmm.
and how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've eliminated it. That's going to be one entire class period. Then I'm going to teach after that, I'm going to teach this third one, which is wrong behavior and observances. What is it? What are the symptoms? How to eliminate it, and how to know that you've eliminated it. So we're going to go through each of the 10 fetters this way all the way until Friday.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You remember I asked you about the action causes an action, and I called it paticca samuppada. It's on Pali language.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard you said the translation to English is dependent origination. It contains of 12 pieces, right? And that's what I've actually been asking about, because I don't know much about exactly this teaching, and I'm wondering, you said, which day will you teach about this?
Yeah, when you said action leads to another action, I said that is what I was understanding as the natural law of karma. But now, if what you're saying is that's dependent origination, I'm going to be teaching that on Friday. Let me see exactly what time on Friday, if you'd like to know. Let's see. It should be, let's see, 4th. Here it is. Okay, so it's going to be Friday morning. I'm going to teach the meditation to eliminate sexual craving on Friday morning, and then right after that, I'll teach dependent origination. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't see any questions online. So I'm going to end here. It's almost 1 o'clock. It's 10 minutes to 1. So whatever you guys decide to do today, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. I'm going to start at 6:30 teaching this first fetter, a personal existence view. And that's what we're going to do through the rest of the days, is we're just going to spend time on each individual fetter until we get here when we talk about dependent origination, because this is an important teaching to be able to understand, even to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So whatever you guys do today, have a wonderful day, and perhaps I'll see you this evening. Okay? Sawadee Krap. Sawadee Krap.